Hi, everyone, and welcome to Get Hired Live. I'm your host, Andrew Seaman, LinkedIn's managing editor for jobs and career development. I'm so happy that you're joining us today, and I want to ask you to introduce yourselves in the comments. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and also what you hope to do with your job search and career. We already have a bunch of people joining us. And in fact, I see Yolanda from Texas, Shirley from Nashville, Shayna from Colorado, Jeremiah from Costa Rica, Veronica from Texas, and Yasmin from Ohio. So welcome to all of you. Keep introducing yourselves in the comments. We have a great show for you today. As always, we're going to be talking about how to get hired, but specifically today, we're going to be talking about your skills, and especially those that make you human. And what we want to do is to really have this great conversation about how you can improve your skills and also use them to get hired. And get your questions in as I'm talking to the guests today, because we'll be answering those toward the end of the show. And as always, even if you have other things that you want to talk about when it comes to job searching, drop those into the comments as well, and we'll take a look at those. We have a great producer who's watching all of your comments and questions come in, so we'll try to get as many as possible. And like I said, today we're going to be talking all about soft skills and how to improve them and help use them to get a job. Now, obviously, a lot of times people have maybe some difficulties with their soft skills, maybe interpersonal communication or communication in general. Sometimes that's not your strong suit. Sometimes you may be neurodivergent and that is an issue for you. Don't worry, we're going to be covering that in an upcoming episode of Get Hired Live. A lot of people have those issues, so we're going to be tackling those too. So today, though, we're going to be talking specifically, like I said, about those soft skills, and we have such a great guest. We have the founder of Better Work Labs, Al Dea. Welcome, Al.
Andrew, it's great to be here with you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for joining us, especially early on the West Coast where you are. I'm joining you live from the Empire State Building, and thank you so much for joining us. And can you tell us a little bit about what you do? Because you are a consultant, and you also help people really figure out what they're good at and really how they employ that in their work.
Absolutely. So my job as a consultant and facilitator is to work with organizations to equip their people to work effectively in the workplace, and specifically tied to those human skills that I think we're going to be talking about today. So much of the work that we do today is working with other people, and we all have to work with other people in order to achieve goals. And so part of my job every day is to go into organizations and to work with their leaders and managers to help them be better leaders and managers by leaning into those human skills to make them work effectively and to unleash the power and talents of people in the workplace. And it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of exciting work working with employees to really unleash the skills they have to be effective in the workplace.
That's great. Yeah. And obviously, we had a great conversation last week on my podcast. I hope everyone will check that out on Apple Podcasts or wherever they like to listen. It's Get Hired with Andrew Seaman. And we have so many people joining us. And I see some people in the comments saying that they need help with their soft skills. And I see we have Zanetta from Chicago, Judith from Montana. We have Joey from Washington, William from Mississippi, Mike from my home state of Pennsylvania. We have Cindy from Toronto, Jared from Michigan, Holly from California, and Sonia from Mexico City. So welcome to all of you. Keep introducing yourselves. And also, like I said, as we continue the conversation, get your questions in because we'll be taking them in just a bit. Now, Al, my first question for you is that, we always hear about soft skills and hard skills. And what is the difference? Soft skills, like we said, are sort of those human skills, but, what is the difference between the two?
Yeah, great starting point. I guess the best way that I would describe it is that if you think about hard skills, they tend to come from specific knowledge and are often tied to a specific task and related to a specific role. So, for example, if you're an accountant, there are specific hard skills and knowledge that you need to know in order to be an effective accountant. A lot of times you might learn these in a particular school or some kind of learning program that are specific to the role. Whereas the soft skills, these tend to be skills about how you work and interact with others. They're the personality traits, behaviors, or interpersonal skills that you use when you're working with other people and for how you get things done. I think a big differentiator between some of the hard and soft skills is that soft skills, they tend to be a little bit more applicable across a number of different dimensions. And so just as a quick example, Andrew, as a news editor, you might have some soft skills that are completely still transferable to perhaps being an auto mechanic But there are certain things as a news editor that are unique to being a news editor that wouldn't necessarily translate to being an auto mechanic. And similarly, an auto mechanic might have some skills that might be relevant to being a news editor. And so those ones that are a little bit more universal across different roles and functions, those tend to be the human and soft ones. And that is also exciting because it also means, particularly for the folks who are joining us today, who are thinking about a new role or opportunity, that there are some transferable skills that they can lean into to find the next thing. And a lot of those start with really understanding what your soft skills are.
Definitely. And, like you said, there are differences between soft and hard skills. And I always like to use the example that, it's almost like playing a piano. Playing the piano is the hard skill.
Yeah.
The soft skill is engaging with your audience. So, it could be how you interact with them, how you sort of reach out to them. And then the actual playing, that's the hard skill. And, we got a comment before the show from Melanie, who said our soft skills are our superpowers and are highly transferable between industries. And these are the skills that are going to make us stand out from others in the job search and interview process.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, and then, now that we know what the difference between soft and hard skills are, how do you identify your soft skills and know what if you need to improve them and how to go about that?
I like to think of the soft skills as the how, as you mentioned that as in the example about the piano. Certainly playing the piano and knowing what keys to hit and how to play the right melody, that's certainly a hard skill. But like you said, how you engage with the audience or how you work with a teacher or things like that, those are a great way to look at your soft skills. And so I kind of a test, maybe, if you will, for your role right now. When you're working with others, what are the things that you have to lean into or that you have to exhibit in order to be effective to get your job done? And so a good place, I think, to start with that is take a task or project or a work stream that you're working on that requires you to work with others, and to ask yourself, what are the things that I'm relying on in order to actually be able to effectively get this task, project, or work stream done? And so that's a good place. And in terms of knowing how good you are at them, I think that is one of the challenging things sometimes about soft skills is that unlike hard skills, sometimes it's hard to measure or quantify exactly how effective you are at them. But I think one thing that we can do in order to do that is to be able to get some feedback, right? And what I mean by that is the good news about soft skills is that you're using them every day. And it isn't, if it's not too difficult to be able to find a peer, a mentor, or perhaps even your supervisor or manager, they can help by observing you practice those specific soft skills. So as an example, if one of the skills that you're trying to improve upon is, in fact, communicating effectively or communicating with eye contact or something like that, someone can observe how you're doing that in a meeting and give you feedback that's relevant and specific afterwards, and really show you, hey, here's where you did that well, or here's how you might be able to think about how you improve upon that. And then certainly the last piece of that is being able to take that feedback and then being able to go and practice again. And I think that kind of loop of being able to identify one of those skills, being able to practice it in real time, to get some feedback on it, and then practice it again is a really good way to start to strengthen some of the soft skills you think you want to build and to get better and improve upon them continuously over time.
Yeah. And like we talked about during the podcast, you're never starting from zero when you have your soft skills, because we all have some level of proficiency when it comes to them. So even if we say, listen, we're really bad at X, Y, and Z, we're still somewhere in between. Like, we're never at zero. Like, I don't know how to code. I could dabble with HTML, but I'm at zero when it comes to like Python or something like that. However, when it comes to like certain soft skills, you're never at zero, because you're born and you just naturally have some level. And I know during our conversation, you talked a little bit about your parents basically working on your communication style. And, honestly, talking to you is a joy, because there's no vocal fillers. There's nothing like that. You're an excellent speaker. And that came through. I know you said that it wasn't great, but it was hard work to actually practice and get better at that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the real quick story there is that I came home with my report card when I was in 5th grade, and I did a really good job. And the thing that my teacher gave me for feedback was that they noticed and observed that when I talked, sometimes I looked down, I used filler words, and I didn't make great eye contact. And so what my dad did, because he wanted the best for his son, was that for the next month, every day before school, he would have me speak to him and to try to talk without having filler words and trying to speak and project and trying to make eye contact. And Andrew, it was painful, but that is also part of the reason over time and many, many years of practice why I'm much, much better at doing it today. And I think that one of the learnings there too sometimes is that, I think you mentioned this when we spoke, in my case, my report card, but for anyone out there, your past performance evaluations or your past feedback that you've gotten from other peers can also be a great place to look for soft skills that you're great at, that you might want to try to use more in your job to stand out, or for soft skills that you might be able to improve upon to be more effective or to better improve upon so you can be a better job candidate when you go and look for a new role. And so that is another great place where you can try to figure out what soft skills do I want to build and improve upon.
Totally. And, like we talked about during that discussion also, you could always talk to your former colleagues, your former bosses, because they see you during your workday and they see how you interact with clients or how you interact with your colleagues. So you could always say, is there anything in those maybe presentations, my time management skills that I should improve? Because, everyone, even though they say they don't judge people, we always pick up on those little notes. Like, Bob is good at managing his time and, Sally is good at, doing those presentations. So as long as people are taking notice, you can ask them for that feedback, like you mentioned earlier. And I think that's so valuable. Now, I want to get into questions from our members because we have so many coming in and a lot of them actually overlap with what I wanted to talk with you about. And we have some here. So Adriana, we have Robinson. Basically, how do you show off your soft skills during an interview or to a potential employer? Because, after you identify them and you work on them, and obviously, that's up to each individual person. Another person can't do that for you. So you have to put in the work. But when you do feel comfortable and you say, okay, I have proficiency in this, maybe I'm a little bit advanced in these areas, how do you actually show that off to an employer?
Great question. A couple key points. I think the first thing is that every interaction you have with another person, whether that is live in person, live virtual, or via communication, is an opportunity for you to demonstrate your soft skills in terms of how you communicate, how you demonstrate empathy and compassion, how you engage with other people, in some cases, how you problem solve. And so it's a little bit meta in a way, Andrew, that the job and career search process is in and of itself a opportunity for you to demonstrate the soft skills that you have. And so that certainly is one element of it. I think the second element of it is to, if you are applying to a role or you're in the process, is to start with the job description or whatever information you might have from what you know about the company or the role to better understand what are those types of soft skills that they might prioritize. Sometimes they will jump right off the page because you will be able to read it in the job description. And then you can start to work those in terms of how you talk about yourself, how you actually exhibit them when you talk to them, the types of specific stories that you might use when they're asking you behavioral interview questions, and making sure that you're really aligning to either those skills that are in the job description or the ones that you know because you've talked to them or you've been told that those really matter. And so I think the maybe the last thing that I would add to this is really in the follow up. I know that I've seen this question come up both in terms of the show, Andrew, but also on other places on LinkedIn, just in terms of the whole importance of being able to engage throughout the process and to write follow-up thank you notes and to make sure that you're polite and courteous and all those types of things. And so again, I think it goes back to the point we're making of just the job search process is a process of demonstrating your soft skills at every moment in the journey. And so I think one just place to start is as you go through the process of applying to a job, just really making sure that at every touch point, you're finding a way to weave in those soft skills and to show up and use those moments to the best of your abilities to showcase your best self.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And Cindy actually has a really good follow-up, which is how do you actually highlight soft skills on your resume? Because obviously, I think on a resume, things like coding or knowing a certain computer system may be more attractive to recruiters and people like that. So how do you actually highlight your soft skills on your resume?
A great question. I think what I go back to is this idea that a lot of soft skills are really about how you relate and engage with other people. And the ability, I think, with your resume is being able to leave some snippets and to get a recruiter or hiring manager curious just about how you work with others. So let me give a specific example. So take the programming and coding one as an example. Sure, you're writing lines of code or you're trying to produce a particular feature or whatever it is, but you're probably working with other people. So how can you make that come to life? Could you talk about how it was a coding project where you were working on a team of 25 other team members across different roles or functions? Can you talk about how the project was a global project in terms of you were working with other developers or other team members across geographies or across time zones or across countries? Other types of ways to demonstrate how it shows that you're, and that specific bullet that you're writing about, that you're working with others, I think is going to be a hint at being able to show the recruiter or hiring manager, oh, this is a soft skill type thing. And certainly with a resume bullet, you can't necessarily fit everything in there. But I think the goal, though, is just to make them interested, as well as to be able to show them that you understand that work is just more than just doing the thing that you're supposed to do on your own in a silo. It's about being able to engage with other people. And then I think when all else fails, I was actually just doing some research on this the other day, Andrew, but I think your colleagues over on the LinkedIn Learning team, they put out their LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report. And so they had, I think, maybe a couple of really key skills that they highlighted. And a couple ones that I remember coming top of mind were management, communication, leadership, and teamwork. And so I think if I just taking a step here as a hiring manager, if someone is able to demonstrate some of those things in a resume bullet, I don't think that's ever a terrible thing. I think that's always going to be, regardless of the job, something to hone in on. And so when all else fails, take a look at what those top skills are. And that can always be a good starting place to think about how might you be able to show those in a resume bullet.
Yeah, and also, and this is also where those reviews come in. So if you are, at an employer right now, what I always suggest people do is print off their reviews, whether it's mid-year, annual, anything that maybe a manager or a supervisor has sent to you that said, hey, you know what, you're really great at conflict resolution, or you're really great at teamwork, something like that. And then on your resume, you could include that in a bullet if you have space, because that's not just you saying, oh yeah, I'm a team player, because anyone could really say that. But at least you have sort of someone who is a little bit more objective and say, as your leader or as your manager, I do appreciate how well you work with others, things like that. So that's a little bit more tangible too. And you could also use that in your cover letter, things like that. But actually, that leads me to the next question from Trang. And Trang wants to know, every company has those soft skills that they mentioned. So teamwork, creativity, innovation. How do you improve those? Because, presenting or interpersonal communication, you can kind of work on that a little bit. But when it comes to teamwork or leadership, those ones, it might be a little bit more difficult to hone those in your free time.
It's a great point. And then this speaks to both the challenge and opportunity with those human skills. Because, well, how do you improve upon creativity? Or how do you improve upon teamwork? It's a really good question. So a couple key thoughts here. I think one of them is just the ability to get more deliberate practice and shots on goal. And what I mean by that is, if you want to become a better teammate, one way to do that is just to be on more teams where you can get a better chance to practice what it means to be a good teammate. And so could you find ways to talk to your supervisor or your manager about finding a couple more opportunities to work on a cross-functional project? Maybe it's within your specific role. Maybe it is a side project or a stretch project, if you will. But the ability to just get more deliberate practice and reps to be able to hone that specific skill of teamwork, I think is just finding more opportunities to incorporate that in your day-to-day work. And when you're in those opportunities, again, it's going back to something we talked about before, the chance to get feedback in terms of being able to, after you complete a project, to do maybe a postmortem and to bring everyone together to talk about what went well, what did we learn, and then also to ask for feedback of how I did. So being able to get that external feedback is a great chance to do that. The other thing that you can do is to do a little bit of a self-assessment. Now, this by no means is scientific, but I do think it can be helpful. So let's say, for example, that teamwork is one of those ones that you're trying to hone. If you get done with a project or something, do a self-assessment and ask yourself, how did I show up as a teammate, right? For yourself, just on your own self-assessment. And then grade yourself, let's say on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not so great and 5 being really great. Well, the next time you do a project like that, you can do a self-assessment again and give yourself a rating again. And if you do that over time, you'll start to be able to have a little bit of self-calibration as to how you're progressing against a specific thing. And I'm pretty confident that if you identify one of those soft skills that you want to improve, be able to find more ways to incorporate opportunities to practice it, get some external feedback, as well as do some internal reflection, I'm pretty confident you're going to have a better sense of what that looks like for you after a few more reps of doing that.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable. And actually, we had a question from Sweta, which was, how do you measure soft skills? Are there tools for employers and job seekers that you recommend? And I think that's probably, just that self-assessment, even though it's not scientific, is probably one of the best, right?
Absolutely. And again, something, again, we keep coming back to the podcast, but one of the things that we talked about, Andrew, on there was this idea of being able to take a page and to study professional athletes and professional performers. So some of the best athletes and musicians and artists of the world, they spend a lot of time studying off the field when they're not playing the instrument, when they're not singing, right? The athletes will often look at game tape, right? And they'll look in a quarterback might look to see, how did I progress? How did I read through my progressions? How did I throw on that particular pass? Looking at the tape and being able to kind of take a look and examine what I did well and what I could have done better. And I think we could perhaps maybe borrow a page off of that for us as employees. We spend a lot of time on the playing field as employees, right? And I think one maybe model to kind of think about is, okay, well, what would it look like to spend a little bit more time on the practice field or in the film room, really reviewing, what we're doing. And so I think that can be potentially a model to kind of take a look at.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable. And we have a question here from Jeanette, and I think this is a good question, which is, what's a good sign during an interview that a company and or hiring manager values soft skills? Because obviously recruiters, hiring managers, they all have different preferences and they'll be looking for different things. So how do you know when it's time to sort of play up your soft skills and really exhibit them during an interview or during the hiring process?
Sure. I think a couple things. I think one thing is you can almost flip it on them, right? As much as you are evaluating, or they are evaluating you on the skills that they are looking for, one way might be to be able to evaluate them on their own soft skills. How are they engaged? Just as every moment in the interview is your opportunity to demonstrate your human skills, they're doing the same. And so being able to pick up in terms of how are they demonstrating some of those soft skills? How are they engaging with you? What are their communications like? Are they demonstrating some of those things that lead you to believe that they understand the importance of working with others in order to achieve goals and outcomes? And so paying more attention and being mindful of that. I think you can also tease it out a little bit in terms of some of the types of questions that you ask of them when you do get a chance to ask questions in the interview process, right? In terms of being able to ask about the skills that are valued for this role or in this company, being able to ask about, how do people work together around here? How does collaboration happen? How do creativity, or how do ideas, or how do initiatives come to life? And being able to get and tease out if this is a place where being able to succeed in those specific things requires people to work together, and that's something that's valued, I think is a good way to kind of get a better sense of to what degree they value those types of things. And then I think, as always, being able to, certainly if you can, to talk to other people in the interview process to get a better sense of why do they like working at this organization, and getting really specific about either behaviors that they've seen that are valued at the company, and getting a better understanding if those things tend to directionally tie towards some of those soft skills. I think it's always hard to know 100% about a role or a company or what their behaviors or what skills they value. But being able to get a better sense, I think, by asking those questions, making those observations, and really leaning into also, again, as much as this is about you, really treating this as a two-way street and evaluating how they are engaging with you in the process, I think that could paint a much richer picture of what it could be like at that company.
Yeah. And even if you sort of pick up on cues that maybe whoever is interviewing you isn't that keen on soft skills or asking about them or paying attention to your soft skills, what I think, and correct me if
Yeah.
you view this differently, but in my opinion, that once you're in the role, the thing that will really set apart someone who is maybe a good coder or someone who is a good bank teller or anything in between, you know, it's going to be the soft skills.
Yeah.
Can you, are you a good written communicator? Are you a team player? Are you a leader? Those sort of things really set people apart, because when it comes down to it, hard skills, you can keep, you could find someone who's proficient at the same level, but what's going to set an employee apart is, are they a leader on the team? Do they rally people? Are they able to maybe offer criticism in a helpful way? I think those are really what will make you really successful in a role, don't you think?
I couldn't agree more. And as a follow up to that, I think if they start asking you, or if in the interview they're asking you questions, and they start asking you questions that are about some of those things in terms of, well, if they ask you a follow up question of, okay, well, how do you work with others, or could you tell me a time when you did work on a challenging team, and how did you manage that, or could you talk about a time when maybe a project didn't go as planned? How did you work together to find a solution? Or if they actually ask you to do some kind of assessment or some kind of option to demonstrate your communication style, I think those are sometimes indicators that they do really value those things. And I think fundamentally, I keep going back to is if they're genuinely curious about how you work with others, I think that could be a good sign that they do really are really trying to pay attention into not just how well you can do a specific task or role, but how you can do it within the context of this organization around these other diverse people.
Yeah, really good points. And thank you so much for all of your advice, Al. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, and hopefully everyone was looking at the bottom of the screen. We were showing Al's link to his LinkedIn profile. Make sure you follow him. He's always posting great advice. And of course, you can check out Get Hired with Andrew Seaman, wherever you like to listen to your podcast, to hear our more in-depth conversation about soft skills. And in fact, while you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever, leave us a review and a rating, because it helps other people like you find the show. And speaking of the podcast, this week on the Get Hired podcast, actually just dropped today, we sat down with Harleny Vasquez, who is a social work career coach, and we talked all about calming the nerves that come with job interviews before, during, and after. And she had such great advice. So I really hope you take a listen to that. Again, that's Get Hired with Andrew Seaman, wherever you like to listen to your podcast. And then Harleny will be joining us next week. My colleague Gianna Prudenti will be filling in for me, and they will be chatting on Get Hired Live on Monday, February 27th at noon Eastern Time. You can RSVP to the show using the link in the comments or on the Get Hired by LinkedIn news page. So make sure you RSVP to that, and you'll get a notification when Gianna and Harleny go live. And you're not going to want to miss that. Harleny is such an incredible person in the realm of job search and career advice. She has experience as a recruiter, so super knowledgeable. You're really going to want to tune in for that. And if you missed any part of today's broadcast with Al, you can always replay this video once we're done. It'll live here. So if you want to come back next week or tomorrow, you can watch it again and get all of his advice. As always, I want to thank you again for joining us, and especially the people who make this possible. We have Nina, we have Elias, we have Scott, we have Gianna, we have Derek, and we have a ton of other people behind the scenes. So thank you all for your help, and thank you for joining us. It's a crazy world out there, so be sure to take care of yourself. You could only get hired, you could only be a good candidate if you're safe and well enough to do so. So until next time, stay well and best of luck.